Welcome to the Xceptional Insights podcast. I'm Sean Wargo, and I'm joined by my colleague, Peter Hansen. Together, we make up the market intelligence team here at AVIXA,
where it's our job to identify trends in the economy and understand how they affect our industry, the professional audiovisual industry.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back for episode 20 of the Xceptional Insights podcast. I have the bittersweet privilege of saying that this will be Peter's last Xceptional Insights podcast with us. Stay tuned for future as to where we go from here, but we wanted to take a moment in Peter's 7 years to get a bit of a kind of retrospective and a forward look. But Peter, tell us a little bit about what's next for you. Where does the journey take you?
I can't believe this is my last Xceptional Insights podcast. We're here in my last week that I'll be working for AVIXA. It has been such a pleasure being here, such a pleasure working for you, Sean, collaborating on everything, learning so much. AVIXA has been a great home. The professional audiovisual industry has been a wonderful place to work, so welcoming. Can't believe I'm leaving, but the fact of the matter is, it's about pull factors. I've just came across my desk a really exciting opportunity at another trade association, one that represents small businesses in the U.S., called the National Federation of Independent Businesses, NFIB. I'm going to be the research and policy director over there. So it's quite a similar role to what I have here, but a little bit more U.S. focused, a little bit more policy focused, and then just for a different sector of the economy, one that sort of like as an economist, we really care about innovation. That's where like a source of growth is, and small businesses are really where that starts, where that happens. So I was just such an exciting opportunity. I'm so excited to get that started next week. But yeah, driving into the office this morning, feeling a lot of sadness for what I'm going to be leaving behind here in our industry at AVIXA. It's been quite a wonderful ride.
It's definitely been a great ride. It's been a pleasure working with you as well. As many of our audience may know, Peter was the author of the Macroeconomic Trends Analysis, our quarterly series, our Channel Employment Report, which is all the salary, benefits, compensation data, as well a participant in a lot of our presentations about industry, our global partner program for macroeconomic insights, but brought that kind of economist perspective into the pro AV industry. What does it all mean? Things like GDP, employment, supply chain issues, tariffs, the more recent phenomenons in our market. So going to be missed for sure. But we also have the chance to tap into what has been a 7-year kind of building of knowledge and kind of perspective that you brought throughout your tenure here. So the starting question would be, boy, we've seen a lot in 7 years, a pandemic and many other kind of external changes. But think about our industry. Over those 7 years, what would you say is the greatest change that's occurred fundamentally for us as an industry? What's different about today versus when you started 7 years ago?
I have to cop out a little bit and talk about 3 large changes. I would say that there's a certain maturation that I think you see in the form of, I would say, like one of the key ways you see it is the rise of private equity kind of coming in and building up international integrators. Not that there weren't some of these when I came in, but it's kind of like scaling up integrators, a lot more sort of like MBA style business running, for better or for worse. Thinner margins, higher volume, a little bit more of, I would say, maybe like IT style. That's been a big change. Like the industry has not lost its creativity, individuality, small businesses, engineer entrepreneurs, but it's evolved clearly since I started in 2018. Then I would say the disruption that we saw pandemic caused with the move to full remote, kind of bringing in the rise of Zoom, bringing in Microsoft via Teams into our industry, Zoom rooms, team rooms, how that's kind of shifted the way Pro AV happens in conferencing collaboration in offices. That to me is a really big change where design and custom are substantially less on a lot of projects. Managed services are substantially more on those projects. That I think is a very substantial change. And then tech stack change is just seeing how much of our industry is, going on the network. Things like whether it's Dante or just the changed approach, the changed philosophy about how AV works is substantial. So I have to, of those three, I can't quite pick out one. It's like each is like in their specific channel. One is tech, one is like one of our biggest vertical market and solution area, and then one is sort of like on the business side. And I think one interesting thing about this is like they're all a little bit IT-ish, like that, like kind of like professionalization, big corporatization has taken us a little bit more like IT companies, IT integrators, rather than like your traditional like small, medium AV integrator. And then of course that movement to these platform-based rooms where like design is a little easier and you manage services, that's very IT style. Big IT players there. And then like everything going on the network. Well, that's very IT. That's where you see IT professionals becoming so literally involved in AV. So maybe if you want to like say the one biggest, like kind of like an umbrella IT-ification, but not in a way that sort of subsumes Pro AV, because Pro AV is so high skill, specific, detailed, complex, that it remains Pro AV, even if it's in a few different ways IT-ified, if you will. What do you think?
Yeah, I was going to actually, that's an interesting thread to pull. So talk to me a bit about distribution, because one of the other facets of an IT industry is heavy reliance on resale and distribution to get product into market. It creates efficiencies, all the other sorts of things. So as we think about supply chain evolution over the past 7 years, what do you think about that as well? Say rise of distributor, shift in supply, partially due to shocks in the system over the last 7 years, continuing shocks, we could argue. How do you see that playing in?
Yeah, that is a really big one. I think maybe, from the perspective of an end user, less so, like in terms like, where you source from, like you're still getting the same products, or maybe you're getting different products, but that's because of one of the other trends I talked about, like the tech trend or the platform-based room trend. But I think the first big tailwind for the rise of distribution was the pandemic supply challenges, whereas like getting supply was super hard. So why don't you just talk to the supply experts, especially if like the product you were used to buying was sold out. What's the best alternative? Oftentimes a distributor is your best source for that. Especially when it's like a really piecemeal landscape where it's like, I got to cobble together this kind of solution. What is available? And you have to talk to someone who really has a lot of manufacturer connections and talk to a lot of people solving similar issues. Since then, we've seen a number of other trends that kind of made this shift to distribution more durable. And that's interesting, not, I would say, like necessarily so much the rise of IT distributors. The IT distributors seem like they've been in the industry for quite a while. We've seen actually even some like more like security-focused distributors coming in, making a significant play, realizing some efficiencies. Like they've been doing low voltage. They've been doing their own overlap between security and AV is non-trivial, and because kind of there's that money flowing in, some slightly new different business models or slightly different specializations, adding new value that maybe wasn't fully realized a few years ago, has just created a more durable rise to distribution. You have more of the IT and true tech background to see how like IT-ish that is than I do. But that's a good call out in terms of a transition, maybe a little bit behind the scenes if you're an end user, because you're still getting your product and that's not really affecting maybe the exact mix. But definitely a non-trivial one when you look back, especially kind of the delta from like pre-pandemic, big change during the pandemic, and then like seem to only consolidate post-pandemic.
Yeah, especially as we look at, there's some IT distributor names that are, of course, now very active in AV as well. TD would be a good example there. I think to your first point, the trend that you saw towards private equity, merger and acquisition, obviously very pronounced in Pro AV as well, the distribution kind of consolidation for efficiency's sake to solve some of the problems that you're talking about. Availability of product, depth of product offering, logistics, all that sort of stuff. I wonder too, the other discipline that can bring in, or opportunity I would say, is managed services. That has been a long-standing, along with kind of AV over IP, it's just a long-standing kind of trend people have been watching, talking about. Managed services would seem to have evolved and become more commonplace during the past 7 years. Every time we look at it, we of course adjust up our figures for it, our estimates for how much of the market. I would still say that I'm kind of surprised that we're not farther along, but I think we've both written and spoken about in the past just the challenges of resourcing that, the challenges of shifting the business model from perhaps a more transactionary, every 7 years you come in, you install, you're done, you check back and see if they need an upgrade, to one that's more continual monitoring, upgrade pathing, service contracts, maintenance contracts, the like. What do you see there? Is there anything, other data point that kind of comes to mind for you?
I think with IT, it really is a lot of stuff that it's absolutely, you just want it to get out of the way. You want your computer to work. You don't ever want to think about it. AV, that's also true to a certain extent. Like you want to just come into a conference room and it works, right? But AV is also creative and it's beautiful and it's wow factor. Like you want to, when a company does like some of their top conference rooms, you want the people to be able to come in there and it works, but you also want it to be like, wow, that's cool. Like, you want people to be like brought into the screen, you want them to be impressed by the audio. So I think that's where like you run into some durable barriers for Pro AV, where it's not just like, keep getting me the core stuff that I need, like I want to have a relatively current laptop that works, that's familiar, and when Word isn't working, I want to ping someone and have them fix it. It's not to say that you don't want to be wowed by your IT ever, but I do think there's like a clear barrier between more nuts and bolts, bigger industry in IT and our smaller but more creative art of AV that I think is one of the true barriers to a transition to managed services. Even be over and above beyond like, okay, like it's difficult to figure out the business model, but if we ever just kind of like really invested, you could just do that. It's like, yes, but you're always going to have to think about like, the AV system is like setting your business identity. Like you can't just contract that out. Like you manage service that, set it and forget it. Operating expenditure is like, we gotta do some thinking about like, what is the look that we're using our AV to create? Like, what is the environment we're using our AV to create? So I think there are some true challenges in a full-on transition, that there'll always be that custom element, that sort of like bespoke process that is just going to always be resistant to a traditional IT style managed services.
Yeah, it would seem that the facet that creates perhaps the best opportunity there is you talk about AV over IP, and the two-way nature of that creates data potential, analytics, monitoring for uptime, downtime, all the things that while I 100% agree, it's art and science. It's art in the fact that it's a creative process to integrate technology to create an experience at the end, and so that will always need some creativity. At the same time, it has a practical aspect for a conference room or such. It needs to be up, needs to be available, needs to be user friendly, and so those dimensions, that data that flows from it, I think is what creates that long-term potential. There's a word that we're using here that I want to explore a bit more, and that's experience. So the other thing we've talked a lot about as both a long-term kind of driver and future potential, which may dovetail us into that kind of discussion now of where's the opportunity, what's the trend, where do we go from here? The one thing you left out of your top three was that experience economy and where we might be today versus where we were 7 years ago. Do you see that as more, less, or the same in terms of its kind of impact to our market? Knowing that, as you said, there's still this aspect of technology, AV technology, that is about the experience it delivers in the end, the creative aspect, not just a nuts and bolts, I need a laptop that does X. It's, how is the room going to look, feel, engage us, those sorts of things, with things like sphere and cosm at the highest end of that, where we're fully immersed in the experience. Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit, because I think that will bring us to future. Does that create more long-term potential for us? Is there a challenge there? Because that's heavily reliant on consumers and their willingness to spend on those experiences. But yeah, let's go there next. Experiences.
Well, I'll tell you what, experiences is the answer to a question we talked about in kind of preparation for this show, which is, what is the biggest opportunity for our industry long term? That's my answer, is the rise of the experience economy, immersion, kind of the flow away from traditional goods to gathering and being together in impressive spaces like Sphere, like Cosm, but all the way down, just every place you go to. I think of, like, for me, in college, I went to my first kind of immersive AV type museum, which was I went there because it was free when I was traveling, and most museums were not free, and so I went there. And it was whoa, this is so cool, the way light made me feel inside of it. It's now all museums are like that. Not maybe all is an exaggeration, but gosh, I remember going to the Smithsonian History Museum as a child and being yep, these are things on the wall with plaques, you could walk around it behind a little curtain, and now it's everything is bright, video, projection map. It's wow. And I think that's an example, maybe longer term. Why did I not mention it for my 7 years? Mm-hmm. I think there's an alternate universe that we all wish we lived in where that was the big thing. But with the pandemic disruption, I started in 2018. We had 2 years, and then experiences had to take a massive dive, left turn, whatever, and then took several years to come back. So we haven't had 7 years of development on experiences from sort of a pre-pandemic comfortable to gathering to the post-pandemic. You have years that we've been comfortable gathering in my career. It's 3, 4, maybe 4 or 5, but add in the financial health issues that experiential providers have had, and that was a challenge. But I think long term, for me, that's just where I look to see, not just a lot of percent growth. It's there in our IOTA research. It's there in other sources. But I think as well, kind of the really precious opportunities where there's custom, there's good margin, it's creative, it's special. For me, that's, I think, the most exciting part of our industry, not just from a pure fun aspect, but also from just a pure business, private equity, MBA influence. I see that as the biggest opportunity for Pro AV long term, and not just the 5-year horizon, but 20 years, 50 years from now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. As my background being sociology, I go to the same place. It's we are social beings. And so the pandemic, if anything, it sort of proved that underlying fundamental human desire to gather. Because what did we do once the doors were open, the museums were back open, we could be back in public? Of course, we went through this, as we all expected and spoke about, is with this just 2-3 year party, right? Of just get out, do everything you can, go to Taylor Swift concerts and spend $1,500 on a ticket, travel the world, be out, focus less on the home, focus more on just places where you can have an experience. So sure, that was an outlier of a data point to some extent because of the kind of contextual response that we had. But I agree with long term. I do think that while there is still let's call it a mundane aspect. Technology has to support basic functionality. That was proven in the pandemic too. Just to be able to continue being productive at work, we had to have simple things like laptops, mics, and cameras, low-cost equipment. Spaces are still being kitted with, as you mentioned, platform-based rooms. It's about scale. It's about replicability. It's about reliability. And so some of that is deflationary. It just comes at an easier to use plug and play fashion. That is less about the creative aspect of Pro AV, but you could say pick an experience and there's an opportunity for Pro AV to augment and enhance that. It could be as simple as a coffee shop where you have background music, maybe you have an open mic night, you've got potentially some displays for entertainment, depending on the format of the facility, of the venue. All the way up, of course, to the highest end inspiring installations that we all agree those are not going to be the normal, right? That's not the average, but it inspires all the way down through. So for a trend that's like 10, 20 beyond, that to me is the driver. It's got to be. There will still be tremendous amounts of revenue made on the mundane, the productive, the just simple installations to get the job done. But as a driver of opportunity and growth and margin for the industry, that's where it's going to be at, which should encourage many. The challenge is, of course, the consumer, and it's always hard to predict, that ebbs and flows. It's cyclical in nature. We overspend, we pull back. We go into debt, we then save. It's a natural cycle of back and forth. It's hard not to look at current situation and say, there's some clear challenge there. Not going to go too deep into tariffs. We've covered that, but that's just part of the contextual reality we have today, which is creating a consumer who might be willing to or wanting to pull back a little bit. But we also can't forget that it's also a consumer who may be recognizing, maybe I need to slow down for a little bit. Maybe I need to just rest and recover from what was a pretty aggressive period of spend. But I guess that gets us to kind of the challenge and the threats. So clearly opportunity, tailwind from experience, tailwind from augmenting or providing productivity, tailwind for things like managed service. What's the threat that we see out there that kind of may blunt or limit some of that opportunity we're talking about?
I think short term are those economic uncertainties, headwinds stemming primarily from tariffs, but also from sort of like not just like that there will be some tariffs, but sort of like this. They could be really huge tariffs. They could be based on like trying to eliminate all U.S. to other country trade imbalances, which is a really weird one. Like, because if you have like a circular trade, like maybe we have Vietnam produces a simple good. We produce like U.S. exports like expensive servicey type things. Mm-hmm. Vietnam can't buy they don't have the wealthy people to buy it. We import from Vietnam, export to another country. The other country maybe imports. Like it's a circular global economy. Mm-hmm. So these bilateral deficits are normal, and just that being part of the concept of trade makes me as like an economist concerned in the short term. Like, what is the vision? Some of the signals are from like economic orthodoxy, concerning. Maybe there's a long-term vision. I'm certainly not pretending to like understand the complete set of goals. Let's be optimistic. Let's hope for the best. But for me, that's my short-term threat, is kind of like short-term economic management, especially through trade. The long-term vision, we're going to move past that. Whether it's because we go through a recession and find a new equilibrium, or the plans change, or in 4 years we have a different president. Whatever it is, that's a short-term concern. For me, long-term, I guess I would say I'm most concerned about AI. And look, it could be a big positive for our industry. Like the uncertainty bands are wide. We collect data on AI and kind of how our industry is viewing AI, and they're positive about AI. Certainly there are benefits that our industry is already realizing through kind of like business operations, to a somewhat lesser extent, but non-trivial content creation. So there's a lot of benefit to be taken from AI. And by the way, I will mention the forthcoming Q2 meta report, which I'm not the lead author on. It's hard to let your baby go. I've been lead author on this since this series inception, and our other analyst, Mike Sullivan, trainers, lead author on the AI report, and I think it's going to be excellent. He's got a lot of good data. Stay tuned for that. I see some like very pure kind of like tech threats. So a conference room that once needed, an intelligent designer, a good integration team to get the microphones placed, to avoid, to get sound equally, avoid interference. All of those challenges being replaced by one smart microphone. That's not like generative AI, but it's just like an AI technology, mapping the room, figuring out where the voices are, balancing all out, filtering out background noise. And all of a sudden, what was once a very challenging, expensive, good margin project is now a cheap single technology solution. And maybe that that piece of technology is like a little bit expensive today with all the development that goes into it, but 5 years from now, that's not going to be expensive anymore. You've come from consumer electronics, the price graphs on like the new technology comes out, it's crazy expensive, and then 10 years later, or less, that $2,000 HD TV is now $200. And so that is a big concern for me from the technology side. I would say as well, from sort of a design perspective, you see a little bit of the challenge from sort of like platform-based rooms, formulaic. And I worry too about AI kind of maybe becoming such a useful tool to like a skilled designer that your design team can really shrink, because it fills in a lot of details and the differentiation is less. For me, that's like 5 years from now, 10 years from now, I worry that AV will be much easier because AI is filling in a lot of gaps that, the veteran professionals in our industry right now are using their extensive experience and knowledge to solve the issues of like sound echoing in a room and different places, and getting video quality and all that. Now, again, this is like I'm on the outside of what the community is saying, and they know about AV in the trenches, way more than I ever will. I love AI. I'm a big AI user, so I follow it closely. But they know AV, so don't maybe take me as a worrywart. Don't take me too seriously, but for me, that's the long-term threat to our industry that I see. Not in the sense of like subsuming our industry or eliminating it, but just making it really hard to maintain margin and maintain total revenue, because there's going to be more AV than ever, but it's just going to be done more simply, more cheaply. That's my concern vision.
There's another way to look at that could be a potential upside. So we've talked about the human capital aspect and the challenges with just real demographics, right? There's many workforces that are net shrinking. It's competitive to find labor, get them trained up, all that sort of stuff. So could it be that an AI helps solve some of that human capital issue, create efficiency, that you could argue if there's an AI tool set that helps you take on some of the higher end tasks, maybe that's that helps you control some of your costs and may improve margin to some extent. As you can tell, I'm always a glass half full type of guy, but looking at the challenges that we face, we've known pre-pandemic even, we ran into those periods where it was just hard. That we're hearing that from our integrator community, that it was hard to find people. It's not going to get easier as we go forward from here, especially if we do realize some of the growth that we are kind of expecting to realize as an industry. You will need more resource, whether human or tech, to allow you to get projects done. So is that a facet, do you think, as well?
Yeah. I mean, I think anytime we're talking about like the work becoming easier, that's sort of like bad for margin, like what are the highest paying jobs? Like, of course there's factors like, do people want to do it? But if it's a hard job, it usually gets paid more than an easy job. Controlling for like desirability, more difficult means you have to focus your hiring on a more select few who are capable of doing it at the caliber. So if AI is making it easier to train people up, whatever, like that's a margin threat. I'd say for me, the positive is more like that AI allows AV to step into more places in the workforce and more places in our social lives and solve more issues. So yes, maybe the products individually are cheaper in a conference room, but there's more conference rooms. So there's more whatever things like, like it's a solution area that doesn't exist in IOTA today. It's not in the product set because we can't do it today, but AI unlocks it. I think that's the real, for me, opportunity that AI could unlock. As we talk again, like, I'm not talking about AI as a threat, like for 5 years from now, like maybe it'll be like, shaving some hair off the margin, whatever. Like it's gonna have some challenges for making the same money from a conference room if you can just use a super smart microphone. Sure. But 10, 20 years from now, that's what you're talking about, an entirely different industry. And I think there could be some opportunities unlocked through AI that we can't even picture today.
Yeah, I would say that the universal theme of a lot of our conversations is agility, adaptability, diversification, those sorts of things. So as you're describing, as if the industry of AV, the discipline of AV sort of stayed as it is, it's, design and integration of technology and space, then it sort of eats away at that more limited business model. So the potential for me is, what new services could an AI unlock? One, we've already touched on, which is a managed service offering. If you're kind of helping your client sit in front of and analyze data streams, of which there's increasing amounts because more and more of the technology is IoT. It's connected to network. It's available as a source of data. That's a potential. We talked about content creation as a service for just digital signage as an example. There's a number of adjacents and emerging sort of skill sets, disciplines, service types that are kind of coming into the market that one would hope, if an integrator is kind of staying agile, is looking at what else could I be doing? This task has become easier. AI is helping me make that simple. Maybe my client is even solving some of these problems for themselves. Then it does become, yes, how do we adapt? And so that's the thing that we kind of have to keep an eye to, is where are there some evolving, emerging opportunities, service sets that we could be offering as an industry? I think during your 7 years, during my time here as well, the thing that had already been talked about when we started and has accelerated to me is the days of just being a straight bang and hang. Go in, you install the technology, that is all you're doing, is clearly challenged as a business model, right? You need to be doing more for your clients. You need to be moving more upstream into design and managed service offerings potentially. So that was already the case. There are integrators who didn't survive the pandemic as a result. We've seen consolidation in that market. Some of it's just lifetime. Many integrators started the business and are looking for exits now that they're ready to retire. But I do think adaptability has been key as we go forward. That would only be more true, right? How you stay agile. Is there any other, say, service area that you would kind of point to as a way, kind of an opportunity forward, something that you're seeing maybe on the fringes of integration business and in IOTA today that would come to mind?
I would just kind of double click on what you were saying about a movement away from bang and hang. Mm-hmm. It's not just that you have to move up. It's either like you move up or you move down. Like you either move like, you can't just do like on small business doing bang and hang, like whatever, without thinking about it that much. The landscape has become really competitive where if you're doing like pretty simple, pretty low value add, you're going to have a competitor who does it at incredible efficiency. Like if you just want a simple project, like it's probably a big AV integrator who can do it at like a really impressive margin because they are run very efficiently. Mm-hmm. So like it's either that lane, ultra efficient, or it's I do custom. Like, look, if you want the low cost, like you're talking to the wrong person. But if you want to get a product that really addresses your needs, and you want to have a service provider who picks up the phone and addresses any issues quickly, like that's my company. And I think that's, for me, like that's the key. It's less like, it's like move up or move down, like either be really efficient, volume, and maybe there's probably a managed services aspect to that, like, volume efficient play. Like that's where you get the margin, is on the managed services, the long-term operating expenditure reliability of your revenue. Or you go all in on custom, you're high skill, you're high touch, you are just not competing in kind of the same space. Like you're specialized. And I think that is a private equity. That is a NBA kind of like approach. It's not like, we just do our thing. It's like we have a niche. We have like a very clear vision for it. And our entire company is structured around it, on maximizing that. It's not to say that plenty of business intelligence, like in private long term, meaning like long term into the past. But I think there's just that tightening up where it's like crystallizing due to kind of intense competition and some of the other trends we've talked about.
Yeah, I potentially would agree, definitely. I think one of the ways that an integrator goes, say, more design or even more content is in things like broadcast AV, that ability to, maybe it's an extension of a live event. Maybe it's an extension off of conferencing collaboration. Because to me, the area that I worry about the most is in conferencing collaboration. Serving a corporate client with just kidding of collaboration space is that place where what you're describing, you kind of move down, you're super efficient, you're able to scale and serve. That is going to be harder for a smaller integrator to kind of handle, but so it forces them to be adaptive a little bit. So maybe the extension for them is get in there, help the company figure out how to capture, optimize, stream content for their corporate events, for their all staffs, for their whatever they may be doing, to try to keep their either employee, audience, customer engaged. We're seeing this, of course, in places like retail. Certainly, there's plenty of corporates that are doing this too. So to me, a broadcast AV is another opportunity for us as an industry where that really solidified during the pandemic. We're talking about something that is notably different about the marketplace that we could have all seen coming. But when you're remote, when you're forced to be remote or at home, the desire, the appetite for video content and such increases, particularly as we're on more Zoom calls and Teams calls. So I think that solidified during the pandemic and was a good area of growth, and which should be continuing to do so over the next few years. Well, let's switch to a sort of a fun topic. I think we've covered all of the opportunities and threats that our industry and the retrospective. What are you going to miss? So there's an annual cycle that is both AVIXA corporate and just the industry with its events. I know I'll certainly miss these podcasts with you, but curious to hear what might be on your mind there.
I mean, to me, what stands out is the community. I think I haven't been in a million industries. People I think who have been in other industries, see something different in AV. And I found this industry to be so welcoming, so many friendly faces. I think a lot of people, competition in business can be cutthroat, stealing ideas, hoarding your advantages, where you get kind of like your beta, your advantage. AV is mostly not like that. It's mostly people have bought into a rising tide lifts all ships, if I help my, fellow AV companies understand how I'm being successful, they'll be successful and drive value in our industry and we'll all be more successful because of it. And I think that's makes this a really special place to be, whether it's, ISE or Infocom. I prefer Barcelona to Las Vegas. So talk about the calendar. I do prefer that one. Orlando's okay. Not a Vegas guy myself. You just go there and you see friendly faces and you sit and listen to a panel and people are just being so generous with what they know and their time. And then you grab them afterwards and they're even more generous when you chat them up. You're like, hey, I'm dealing with this issue. I'm seeing it this way. And they're like, well, let me add some detail. And here's my contact information. That's really special. And I would say even getting more microscopic, being here at AVIXA, it's a great community here. So many, friends within the organization, coworkers who are really dear to me. People like you, Sean, people like Noreen behind the camera here, our producer, people I'm going to stay in touch with. The AV industry will never be far. I still follow whatever people on Twitter, my Google searches. I'll check in on the trade pubs, and I'll be following, my connections on LinkedIn and as well socially with, lifelong friends. I hope that's what I'll miss most. Also, the tech's really cool too. I'll probably always go into a room and a conference room and notice the brands. I'm going to this new trade association and I remember walking into the interview and they had Yay-Link systems. I noticed that stuff now in here.
Occupational hazard.
As you say, occupational hazard. Yeah. But it's the community. That's what I'm going to miss.
Likewise. So we promise to probably stalk you a little bit too, see where you're going, what's up in the world of Peter and the new research that you'll be representing. Agree totally on the community. Look forward to the events. Orlando obviously coming up, a chance to be in that community.
Sorry to miss it.
Yeah, you're always welcome to come and join us for those. But may we remain scrappy, cottage, collaborative, all that sort of stuff. But I think that's part of the art that this is. We recognize each other's strengths. Well, it's been a pleasure, Peter. Certainly look forward to seeing where you go next. Otherwise, this has been our last episode of Xceptional Insights with Peter Hansen. Thank you so much for joining us. Until next time, we'll see you at Infocom.